I'm sorry, I'm not in a very good state right now. I received some really sad news. Actually, it's my brother in the States. I think something has happened to him. I don't know what he has been accused of. So, yeah, I got that message this morning, and I was on the phone with my parents because my mom is really worried about him because he's alone there in America. And you know how it is sometimes when you're living in a foreign country and you have all these kind of problems with maybe with the people that you hang around with and things like that, you can really be discouraged. And I think the Lord wanted me to prepare this sermon because sometimes these kind of things happen to us. And so the question I wanted to ask you this morning is, are you discouraged, or do you know why? What's going on in your life that is causing you to be distressed? Have you lost hope, or do you see anything happening to your future whatsoever? What causes you to be distressed? Why are you discouraged? So I want to talk to you about this overcoming discouragement, because you see, one of the tests that we all have to face in life on a regular basis is the test of not getting discouraged. No matter how successful you are or how many victories you've had in the past, sooner or later there'll be an opportunity to get discouraged. I've seen so many people that used to have, a spring in their step. They used to go out each day with this excitement, but all of a sudden they've let this heaviness to come on them. And just like a dark cloud, it follows them wherever they go. And until they learn the principles of how to pass this test of discouragement, it will keep them from God's best. And this is what happened to the children of Israel. They were headed towards the promised land. The Bible says that they became discouraged along the way. And if you look at that carefully, it means this didn't happen just at once. No, little by little, they got worn down. They lost this passion for life, and and they got discouraged. And if you think about the Israelites, they were good people. They loved the Lord, and but over time, they just got tired of this journey, and then they said, you know what, this isn't working. This trip isn't working. Let's just go back to Egypt. So what happened to them? They lost this. They failed this test of discouragement. And this kind of situation can happen to us today. When in life we're going to face this kind of situation, and on our way to our destination, there'll be opposition. It might take longer than we had hoped, and it might be more difficult than we thought. So it is easy to get discouraged and think things won't work out. You just keep talking to yourself like, I'm tired of treating people right that are treating me wrong, or I'm tired of this and that. But what you have to realize, that on the other side of this discouragement, there's a new level. And another excellent example of discouragement is God's servant, Elijah. God had gloriously defeated the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. And when Queen Jezebel heard that 450 of her prophets had been slain by Elijah, she threatened to do it. She threatened to kill him in 24 hours. And Elijah, in this utter despair, he fled where? He fled into the wilderness and sat down under a tree and asked God to take his life. Thankfully, you find that I think that's in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 4. Thankfully, that was one of Elijah's prayer that God didn't answer. So what was Elijah's problem? Think about it. After a victory, after defeating those prophets, how could he soon become discouraged to the point of taking his life? Well, first thing he did is that he took his eyes off God. And that's the first step to discouragement. You take our eyes off God when these problems come to us. And secondly, he focused his attention on other people, and circumstances. You see, he got that threat from the queen that she was going to take his life. And thirdly, he saw his problem. He saw his problem instead of God's purpose. And fourth, he resorted to self-pity. And finally, he sank into despair. So now what I want us to do today is I want us to look at this word discouragement and what it's all about and what it's like. Well, one thing we know is that we all know that you and I both know that discouragement is a universal kind of thing. You can get discouraged, I can get discouraged, anybody can get discouraged. And almost every one of us has been dismayed at one point or another. If you look at what's happening to the economy today and all these things that are going on in this world, it's easy to get discouraged. So discouragement is a universal thing. It affects almost everybody. And the other thing about discouragement, it is a recurring kind of thing, Today you can be discouraged and then, you can get over it. Next thing, something bad happens to you and guess what? You're back, you're discouraged again. So it is a recurring kind of thing. And likewise, discouragement is very contagious. You might know someone that is really down and depressed and discouraged, and you begin to talk with them, and the next thing you know, you are the one, if you're not careful, you are the one who becomes discouraged. So it is very contagious. And the other thing about discouragement is that it is temporary. It's not going to last forever, and that's a good thing. And it actually, that kind of situation happens if we know how to deal with it. If we know how to deal with it, it won't live in us. So how can we handle discouragement? Well, first thing is we need to know the differences between discouragement and a disappointment. We need to know there's a difference between a discouragement and a disappointment. What is a disappointment? Well, a disappointment is an emotional response to some failed expectations, to some failed hope, and to some failed desires. Let's think about this. For example, you teach your children something and then they disappoint you. You get disappointed, right? Or you study very hard for this exam and you get disappointing results. So that's disappointing. And or for example, you cook a wonderful meal for your friend or your husband or your wife, and he comes home, eats that meal, and he just walks off without saying, "Oh, I enjoyed the meal. That was a nice meal." You get disappointed. So disappointment is inevitable. It's unavoidable. We'll always get disappointed by a person, by a circumstance, or by a situation. But discouragement is something else. Discouragement is the feeling of despair that we choose. So discouragement is a feeling of, it's a choice, So I don't have, so that's a good thing, right? I don't have to remain discouraged, I may get discouraged, but I do not have to remain discouraged. So disappointments are inevitable. Someone is always going to disappoint us one way or another. But discouragement is something else. So today what I'm trying to say is that you do not have to remain discouraged no matter what's going on in your life. And that's a wonderful thing. So, we do not have to remain discouraged. So that's a very good message for us. So even if something wrong is happening to our lives, we can ask someone to relieve us from this discouragement. And so what are the causes? So what are the causes of discouragement? Well, one of the causes of discouragement is the inability to please someone. Let's think about that. You are married and or you're living with this person and you do everything to try to make them happy, but you fail. That is very discouraging, right? You do this, you do that for that person, and the person still is not satisfied with all the things that you do, with all the effort that you make. It's very, very discouraging. This happened to my friend in Zambia. When I went back to Zambia, that was 3 weeks ago. I met one of my friends who's a very successful businessman, and we had lunch together. He has all these, he's just very successful. He's rich. He has all these nice cars and nice houses and things like that. And I was like, wow, I was admiring all the stuff that he had. We were having this wonderful lunch. And I was like, wow, man, God has really blessed you. You have a nice house, beautiful children, and all these things, And then I started telling him about my situation and how things are in Japan, because he wanted to know about Japan. He's like, oh, Perry, I want to visit you. I heard so many good things about Japan. I said, yes, Japan is a very beautiful country. But, sometimes it gets you, like what gets you? Like, oh, with work, sometimes you get tired, because, I work from like 10 to like 10 in the night, and I get really exhausted. And when I get exhausted, I get home, I try to catch up with things, but, I sometimes lose it. I lose that focus, and sometimes I want to come to church on time, but, I don't have that energy to get up in the morning. So sometimes I am discouraged. And I told him this, and he was like, you know what, Perry? You know what, to tell you the truth, I have been down. I was like, oh, really? So what are you talking about? Then he began to tell me his situation. He's like, you know what, I'm having problems with my wife. I said, yeah, but what's wrong with your wife? I mean, she seemed nice, I had a good time with you and with her. And she was like, oh, no, she's I've tried my best. I work hard. She asked for a car, I bought her a car, but she's not satisfied with that car. She's comparing that car with other cars her friends are driving. And I'm like, okay, so we sold that car, we bought another car, and now she's saying, oh, that car is too big. I wanted something more small. Perry, I'm getting so tired. She asked for a house, we bought a house, and houses in Zambia have become really, really expensive. And she complains about, we should have lived near town because I'm exhausted. Every time I go to work, I have to get on the bus and things like that. So my friend was really down because it's the same thing. He goes back home, she's just telling him this and that and this and that. And every day, it's like they end up having this argument, this misunderstanding, and he loses it. And he told me, look, Perry, I'm so tired. I said, look, ask God to talk to you, talk to God, and talk to your wife again, pray about it. But he was like, oh yes, I'll try. So that's what happens. Those are the causes of discouragement. You fail to please people that you love sometimes. And another cause of discouragement is physical or verbal abuse. Let's look at some of the situations. I'm a teacher and I teach some of these kids, and some of these kids really fear their parent. They're so afraid. And I'm giving this lesson. This kid looks, when the mom walks in, she's, nervous and, panicking. And I'm like, what's wrong with you, And later on, I just discovered that sometimes the mother really, pressures her. He gives her so much stress. She told me one day, like, you know what, Perry, sometimes when I don't do my homework or when I don't do the homework you give me, my mom actually beats me. So sometimes there's this kind of treatment in this home. And and it's really a sad thing. It's really discouraging. The mother thinks she's educating her, but she's really, she's demoralizing her own child, because this child is now, every time we're having a lesson, we're clapping our hands and singing and dancing. She's just looking sad, and and when it's time to go home, she's almost about to cry. And I'm wondering, like, what's going on in this child? But you see, that's really sad, because parents these days pressure their children a lot, because maybe they have also other issues, and then they release all this anger and all this stress on their children. And that's not a very good thing, because children respect. Let me tell you this, I know some parents don't realize it. And even my dad at one point didn't realize it, because he was very strict. So children respect and love their parents, and they admire them. And when you do these harmful things to them, you are just discouraging them. And you know what happens when they get discouraged? It becomes a mental problem. They become depressed. And when they become depressed, they just lose this hope in doing anything. That's why nowadays we find kids who have no dreams or they have no ambition. When you ask them, what do you want to do, after school, they're like, I don't know, My mom is always complaining, and I don't feel like doing anything. I feel like staying home. So such kind of things happen to many families because of discouragement. And another example of some of the causes of discouragement is unanswered prayer. Let's think about it. Sometimes we get that feeling that God is not listening. That God is not listening and answering our prayers. It has happened to me before. Sometimes you pray for this job. God, I want this job. But it's always another person who's getting a job, I come to church every Sabbath. I do everything. I pray. I attend prayer meetings. But you know what? God is giving somebody else these blessings. And you're asking yourself, why? How long? How long will it take to get this thing that I've been asking God? And you remember last time I talked about my sermon. I was talking about a woman in Zambia who had prayed for 20 years for this miracle to happen to her life. 20 years, God. And it took that long. So sometimes God says yes, sometimes God says no. And sometimes God says wait. But we have to be patient. It's always for a good reason. God's purpose, God's plan for us is always a good plan. And yes, another cause of discouragement is lack of recognition. Let's think about it at work. Sometimes, we work hard. We put our effort at work. But, your boss or the person who's above you never looks at what you do, you work hard, you come to work on time, and you do your very best, but nobody says anything nice about what you do. You become very, very discouraged. Nobody cares. Nobody says, Mark, you've done a good job. Congrats. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all the effort. Sometimes, we are all human beings. Sometimes we want people to, we want a bit of love, We want people to, to appreciate some of the things. It's very natural. We all think like that at some point. And then, of course, another thing that causes discouragement is financial pressure. And I'm sure most of us have had this kind of thing. You lose your job. Let's give that example. You lose your job, and you know what it means when you lose your job. You lose your job means you're going to lose almost everything that you have. You start losing your apartments, you start losing your things. In some cases, maybe you have to still sell things, to get by. And at times, you might have a job, but what happens is that you can't. You have problems, with your mortgage. Your mortgage is too high, and every month or every time you get back home, when you open your mailbox, it's just bills and bills, phone bills, utility bills, and you don't understand why you can't get out of this, this financial pressure. It's always phone calls, the credit company calling you and reminding you that you owe them this and this and that and that. What happens to you? These problems can really get us. We get discouraged. And then, of course, there are health problems. Sometimes we have health problems. We go to doctors, and doctors can't help us. It has happened to my friend. One of my friends, he told me he went to the doctor, and he told him that, doctor, I'm not feeling well. And the doctor gave him a certain type of medicine. He took it, drank that medicine for weeks, but he still didn't get better. He went back to the doctor again. He said, look, I'm not feeling fine. And the doctor gave him the same medicine, you see. And he's like, look, this medicine is not treating me. But the doctor was like, look, there's nothing I can do about it. I think that I'm giving you the right prescription, so you just drink it properly and you get fine. So this is what happens sometimes, We have these health problems and we can't go to anyone and ask for help. We are stuck with these problems. And sometimes we discover that we have really serious diseases like cancer. Sometimes we have these diseases like cancer or AIDS. And that is very discouraging. You think about it. Maybe we haven't thought about it. Imagine you have AIDS. And if you don't have this strong faith in God, you will stop coming to church. That's a fact. I know somebody who got this serious sickness and he became really discouraged. He just felt like, I don't understand why God is giving me this sickness. I don't smoke. I don't eat bad food. I'm a vegetarian. Why should I get such a terrible disease? Why can't it be that guy who's always drinking in the bar, smoking? Why does it have to be me? Me, I'm God's servant. I'm doing these things for Him. So we such kind of situations happen even to people like us, and we don't understand why, and we become discouraged. So we can go down all these lists of different kind of things that discourages us. And so I'm looking at my time. So what are the consequences of a person living in discouragement? Well, first of all, the thing that it does, when you're discouraged, that it divides your attention. And that bothers me sometimes. Like sometimes I come to work and I try to work, but I fail. I fail to teach. I prepared the lesson, and when I start, good morning class, everyone, how are you? Fine. And all of a sudden I lose the lesson, because I have this thing that is bothering me. I've got something that is nagging in me, and I can't get rid of it. So that's what it does. Those are the consequences. When you are discouraged, it gets to the point that you don't think properly. You lose time. Like even sometimes I don't notice. It's 10 o'clock because I have this thing in me that is bugging me, and I'm trying to find a way out of it. That's one of the consequences of discouragement. Another one is you start to blame people. This is what happens, when you're discouraged and all these bad things are happening to you. What do? Well, you start blaming other people for these problems. I'm down. I'm not happy because of this person. This person is causing me to feel like this. This is what happens. And you should realize, when you start throwing and pointing fingers at people, just know something is happening to you and you need help. You are in trouble. And it happens. It happens in our homes. And I'm sure some of us will have experienced this kind of things. All of a sudden, you're just in a bad mood and you want to point fingers at other people and blame other people for your misery. Those are the consequences when you're discouraged. And another very sad, very serious consequence of discouragement is that we get angry. You think about that. We get angry. Someone says something, we quickly just snap. We lose it. And when we get angry, what happens? We get depressed. And then what happens to a person who's depressed? Well, we end up going to what? We go to doctors now. Why do we go to doctors? Because we think doctors will help us feel better. But you see, of course, doctors will make you feel better. They'll give you those, I don't know what you call those pills. And you take those pills. You will take those pills and you will feel better for some time. But for how long? The moment you stop taking those pills, that problem is going to hit you back and you lose it. You get angry, you get depressed, and you start doing all these things. So that thing continues to happen. So pills or medicine, I'm not saying they're bad for you, but it doesn't get rid of that thing that is inside, that discouragement. You need something, or you need someone who can get rid of that thing that is bothering you. Medicine doesn't get rid of discouragement. Medicine just makes you feel better. And sometimes it's just temporary. And in some cases, you become even a drug addict, You just start taking this, you believe these medicine. Medicine can control our lives, and people don't realize that. And another thing that happens also with discouragement, or the consequence, is that we become alcoholic for some people. I know some of my friends who were Christians, and things just started going bad for him. He started having health problems, financial problems. He lost it. He said, look at Perry, this is not working for me. Coming to church is not helping me. God is not answering my prayers. I'm having all these problems. People are looking at me differently. I hate that. I come to church, people ignore me. People don't recognize me. I'm tired of this thing, Perry. And no one understands. And that's the thing about discouragement. We feel that people won't understand what you are going through. And what do? You lock yourself up in the house. You don't want to meet people. You don't want to go to church. You don't even want to read the Bible because you think it's not working. You see, that's what happens to us. And one of those consequences is a loss of confidence. That's really bad. We start losing confidence, And when you lose confidence, when you're not so sure about yourself, when you're not sure that you can do it, when somebody asks, oh, Perry, can you preach? And you're like, I don't think I'm ready to do this kind of job, That's the thing about discouragement. You're so down and you think you can't do such things. And what it does is that it starts even affecting you. It's not just about preaching, but it even affects the people that are around you. When you lose that confidence, it affects your relationship. It affects even the people, your children. It gets even into them. So because of loss of confidence is devastating. And Yes, and let's see. So those are the consequences. And sometimes one of those consequences is that we make unwise decisions when we are discouraged. You know, when it's not, let me tell you one thing. When we are discouraged and you know, when we get a little, you know, funny about things, it is not wise. It is not wise to make a decision when you are exhausted or when you are tired. It is not wise to make a decision when you are angry. And certainly it's not wise to make a decision when you are depressed, because you are not thinking properly. And this is what many people do. You know, when we are angry, that's when we make a decision, you know. I've seen some cases, you know, this couple were fighting and then suddenly the guy got angry and said, you know what, let's break up. You know, let's break up. This relationship is not working. I'm tired of it. You go in your way, I go my way. You know what? And then what happens when we do that? When we go back home, we think about it again. When we get better, we're like, oh, you know, did I say the right thing? You start to regret that you use really more wrong words on someone you love. And sometimes it's too late when you go back to that person and you apologize to that person will never forgive you for that. Oh, look what you did. You punched me. Huh? You abused me. And now you're saying, I'm sorry, I love you. So sometimes that's what happens, you know. So it's never wise to make a decision when you are discouraged. Okay, so now we all know that the consequences of discouragement are not worth it. So the question you want to know is, or maybe the question that you want to ask is, what is the cure of discouragement? Well, the cure of discouragement is this. You have to. One of the cures of discouragement, I think of about 4. There are many, I know, but I can only think about 4 right now. And one of them is that you have to look within. Look at yourself and ask yourself this question: Why am I discouraged? You know, what's causing me to be this way? You know, what's happening to me? And then the other thing that we need to do when we're discouraged is we need to look up. And, you know, we need to look up and say, you know what, God, you are the one who can rescue me from these problems. You are the one, you know, I know you love me. I know you died for me. I know if I believe in you, you get rid of this discouragement. So first we look within and then we look up. And then the thing that we need to do is that we have to also look back. We need to look back and let's not look back at all the bad things we did in the past. No, let's look back and see all the good things that God did for us. You know, and sometimes that is very important, you know, because history tells us what's in front of us. So we need to look back, look at all the things, look at all the situations. You know, one time you had financial problems, but who delivered you from it? You prayed about it. God released that stress from you, that discouragement. You had health problems. You prayed about it. God got you through that. You know, you had problems with your relationship. Who did you ask for help? You asked God, and He helped you. So we look at all those things. We look at our life, our experiences, and then after we look back, what do? We look forward. Why do we look forward? Because we all know, as Christians, we all know that God has a plan for us. And we know that the plan that the Lord has for us is a good plan. God's purpose, God's will, and God's plan for us is always a very good plan. So this is my prayer. This is my prayer this morning. I know some of us have been hit by some of the things that I mentioned. I don't know what problems you're facing. And probably you don't even know the kind of situation I'm facing. You know, we sometimes pretend to be fine, but you know, deep down there, we have this thing, and sometimes we need help. And especially in a country like Japan, sometimes, I'm being very honest with you, sometimes I'm down, you know, because I want to share my problems with people. But you know, every time I wake up, it's work. I have to go to work. And after work, I come back home, I'm exhausted, I'm tired. And I have this problem, and I'm like, okay, I'll think about it, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Next day, I get up, it's open, you gotta go to work. You know, you work, and then after work, you're exhausted, and you still have this problem, and it just grows and grows and grows in you, and it becomes a cloud. And all of a sudden, you know, it blows. And when it blows, that is terrible. Things just start going wrong. Everything goes wrong. You start blaming people for all the things that are happening in your life because you are discouraged. So remember, when you reach that stage, when you reach that point when this thing is eating you inside, look within, look up, look back, and look forward. And look at some of the stories that we have in the Bible. If you think about Elijah, look what God did to Elijah. Instead of being upset with him for getting discouraged, what did God do? He did 5 things. The first thing is that he allowed Elijah to rest. So rest is very important when we are discouraged. And secondly, he touched him through an angel. You find that in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 3. And God touched Elijah through an angel. And when discouragement strikes you, we desperately need God's touch. And the third thing that God did is he spoke to Elijah. And if we ever need to hear God's voice, it's when we are discouraged. And he speaks to us. We don't realize it. He speaks to us every Sabbath when we come here, through our sermons, through Benedicta's sermon, through Max's sermon. God is always talking to us. And that's the funny thing, we don't realize that even today, God is talking to you through me. I'm not the one who's saying these things. I didn't even have time to prepare this sermon. I'm just thinking this is God talking through me, telling you not to be discouraged. And that's the thing, because that is the issue. That is the main problem that many people are facing right now. Look at the economy of Japan. Let's be honest. We're in a recession. People are worried. People are very pessimistic. So every time we come to Sabbath, when you come to church, let us open our ears and receive the bread of life, because it's through this message, it's through these sermons that Mark and Brother Noah and all these people who come up here to stand and preach for you, it's through those sermons that we will be encouraged in God. And then the other thing is that, let's look at what the other thing that God did to Elijah. The fourth thing is that he provided Elijah with needs. And some of our greater discouragements are simply the result of not knowing what to do. And that you find that in 1 Kings 19 verse 6. And another story that I wanted to look at is David's story. David's experience after Ziklag. Remember David's story after Ziklag? Is it Ziklag? The city of Ziklag was destroyed. What happened? I think David returned with his soldiers, and he found Ziklag. The whole city was burnt, and David was very discouraged. His family and his soldiers' families were taken captives by the Amalekites, and David was really devastated. He wept until he had no tears in his eyes. Can you imagine crying until you run out of tears? He really cried bitterly. He was really discouraged. But you see, it even gets worse. Even the people, even his soldiers, his friends turned against him after that situation. You see, they started blaming. This is what we do when we become discouraged. We blame other people. So David became more discouraged because even his soldiers turned against him. They were even ready to stone him to death. But what did David do? Did he stay discouraged? No, he didn't stay discouraged. What did he do? Well, he if you read 1 Samuel chapter 30 verse 7 and 8, it says that even though even though his people threatened to stone him to death, he encouraged himself in the Lord. Amen. He encouraged himself in the Lord. So that's a very strong message for us, today. When we are down, we should encourage ourselves in the Lord. It's only Jesus that's going to deliver us from all this misery that we are facing. So this is my prayer this morning, that we will be encouraged in the Lord. Thank you so much. Amen.